Get out of my boardroom! Her voice cracked through the glass like thunder against marble. Every head turned. In the sterile white of Horizon Holdings' executive suite, silence followed her outburst, the kind of silence that tastes like power abused. She stood in a cobalt suit, jaw clenched, finger raised. Across from her, a man in a salmon-pink suit didn't flinch, not once. His posture was carved from patience, his gaze level not defiant, just steady, like someone measuring the storm instead of running from it. Behind him, 2 security guards lingered near the doorway, waiting for a signal. Around the room, junior staff froze mid-breath. You could almost hear hearts double beating with second-hand fear. "Who let him in here?" the woman demanded. "This meeting is for executives only." He said nothing. He didn't have to. The air tightened. Somewhere, a coffee cup clinked against a saucer. Somewhere else, someone whispered, "That's the consultant?" As if the word itself didn't fit the man wearing it. The woman stepped closer, voice rising, each syllable cutting through the room. "You people think you can just walk in here like you belong?" That word belong lingered. He blinked once, slow. The kind of blink that stores 100 memories of doors closed, voices raised, and rooms that never expected him to stand at their center. Before she could speak again, his voice entered the room low, measured, calm enough to scare her because it didn't need to climb. "I was invited." Laughter broke somewhere in the back, short, nervous, ugly. One of the guards shifted his weight forward. The woman smirked. "Then whoever invited you will answer for it." He turned slightly, just enough for the overhead lights to hit the gold edges of the access badge clipped to his lapel. Still, no one noticed. Not yet. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen once. Far away, a system woke up. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here." Now, back to Marcus Ellison. He looked up, meeting her eyes again, calm, anchored. "You asked who let me in," he said quietly. "You did. When you decided appearance defines authority." She frowned, confused for half a second before snapping, "Security." The guards moved. And that's when the cameras in the corners began to blink red live feed, streaming straight to the company's internal network. He didn't move. He just smiled, faint, deliberate. Because the moment she called security on him, the meeting was no longer hers. It was his. Part 2, the room starts to turn. The guards didn't move right away. They looked at each other first, that tiny flicker of hesitation that says something feels off. The woman in the blue suit noticed it too. Her authority cracked for half a second, just long enough for Marcus to take a single, quiet breath. The boardroom was designed to intimidate. White walls, glass tables, fluorescent light that left no shadows. But now it looked like a stage, and she was performing too loudly. "This is a closed meeting," she said, voice clipped, controlled again. "You're not on the agenda." Marcus slipped his phone back into his pocket. "Maybe you should check the updated agenda," he replied softly. One of the junior analysts, a woman in a gray blazer near the corner, glanced down at her tablet. Her brow furrowed. Ma'am," she whispered. "His name is on the schedule." The room stuttered. A cough, a shuffle of chairs. Then the woman in blue snapped, "That's impossible. That must be a mistake." Marcus turned his gaze toward the analyst, not accusatory, just steady. "Thank you for checking." The analyst's voice trembled. "You're Marcus Ellison, right?" "Correct." The sound of his name rippled through the room like dropped water. Someone at the far end muttered, "Wait, the Marcus Ellison?" Another leaned forward, whispering, "Isn't he?" But the woman in blue cut them off with a sharp wave. "This meeting is confidential," she barked. "Security, remove him now." The guards moved again, slower this time. Their eyes said they weren't sure which order to obey, the shouting manager, or the quiet man who looked like he might own the building. Marcus stayed still. His calm was disarming, almost inconvenient. "I'd rather you didn't," he said evenly. "You might regret it in the next 5 minutes." The woman's face flushed. "Is that a threat?" "No," he said. "A forecast." The room inhaled collectively. You could hear the hum of the ceiling lights, the faint buzz of someone's phone vibrating under the table. Then a ping. On every digital screen in the room, a new notification flashed. "Executive Access Override, authorized by M. Ellison." The analysts stared. The guards froze mid-step. The woman's confidence faltered. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Marcus turned slightly toward her, voice calm enough to slice through the silence. "You told me I didn't belong," he said. "But the system seems to disagree." He stepped past her, not in defiance but inevitability, toward the head of the table. No one stopped him. Behind him, the woman in blue tried to regain control. "This isn't over!" she shouted. Marcus didn't turn around. "It never is," he said. "It just gets recorded." And in the corner, a young intern quietly tapped her phone, recording already begun. "Bạn đã nói, tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho part 3. GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói." Part 3. The crack in control. Her voice followed him across the boardroom like the scrape of metal on glass. "You can't just walk in and take over this meeting." Marcus stopped halfway down the table. His reflection in the glass looked back at him calm, unhurried, unshaken. "You already gave it to me," he said quietly, "when you raised your voice." Laughter rippled again, softer this time, nervous and uneven. People weren't sure who to side with anymore. The woman's authority had started to collapse, one quiet sentence at a time. A man at the far end of the table, Richard Lang, Chief Operations Officer, leaned forward, squinting. "Hold on," he said slowly. "Are you the Marcus Ellison from Ellison Group?" Marcus turned his head, expression unreadable. "I am." Richard sat back. "Then why wasn't I informed of this visit?" Marcus answered, "Because I wanted to see how your leadership behaves when no one's watching." A rustle of discomfort moved through the room. The assistant nearest the door suddenly looked pale. She'd been the one to escort Marcus in earlier, believing he was a consultant. The realization hit her now like a falling ceiling tile. The woman in blue tried to recover. "This is still highly unprofessional," she snapped. "You can't show up unannounced and expect—" He cut her off with a single glance. "Respect?" he asked. "I don't expect it. I measure it." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Around the table, a few people shifted, eyes darting between them. The tension was no longer about race, or authority, or protocol. It was about exposure. Marcus walked slowly toward the large screen at the end of the room. The company logo pulsed there. Horizon Holdings, innovation with integrity. He tapped the edge of the console. The slogan flickered, then vanished, replaced by a live feed from the building's internal cameras, the very footage from a few minutes earlier. The entire confrontation, her shouting, his calm, the guard's hesitation, all of it played silently on screen. Someone whispered, "This is being recorded." Marcus nodded. "Every meeting in this building is. You built the system, I own it." The woman stepped back, face draining of color. "You can't use that footage." "I don't need to," Marcus said. "It's already archived in compliance." He turned back to the room. "Do you see what happens when arrogance meets evidence?" No one spoke. Even the hum of the lights seemed to retreat. The junior analyst, the same one who'd checked the agenda, stood abruptly. "Sir, I think you should see this," she said, her hands trembling as she held out her tablet. "There's a message from the board. They're watching this feed live." "Hi." Marcus nodded once. "Good." The woman in blue sank into her chair, her voice shrinking. "You set this up." He paused. "No," he said, walking toward the head of the table again. "I gave you a stage. You built the scene." He sat, finally, in the chair meant for her. The room seemed to bow inward, gravity shifting toward whoever had just claimed the center. "Let's proceed," Marcus said. "Now that we're finally being honest." "Bạn đã nói, tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho part 4. GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói." Part 4. The Test of Silence. No one dared to breathe too loudly. The hum of the projector filled the space where authority had once lived. The woman in blue, Victoria Ames, Senior Vice President of Operations, stared at the live feed looping behind Marcus. Her own reflection glared back from the screen, frozen mid-shout, finger pointed at the very man now sitting at the head of her table. She straightened her blazer, searching for her composure like a drowning hand reaching for air. "This is unethical," she said. "You came here under false pretenses." Marcus didn't respond. He just turned a page in the notebook before him, pen tapping softly against the table. 1, 2, 3 beats. The rhythm was surgical, not accidental. "Say something," Victoria pressed, her tone edging toward desperation. He finally looked up. "When someone shows you who they are," he said evenly, "you take notes, not sides." The junior analyst, Jenna, barely 30, Her voice shaky but resolute whispered, "Sir, the board message. It says stand by for confirmation of authority." Marcus nodded once, still calm. "Good. Then we'll wait." Victoria scoffed. "You think the board will side with you after this ambush? I've been here 12 years. He studied her for a moment, then said, 12 years. Then you should have learned the difference between management and leadership." Her mouth opened, but again nothing came. Behind her, Richard Lang folded his hands, watching quietly, calculating. The others avoided her eyes altogether. The energy had shifted permanently. Marcus wasn't fighting for control anymore. He was defining it. On the big screen, the looping footage froze on a single frame, her shouting, his stillness. Then a new overlay appeared. Live audit. Bias report triggered. Victoria turned sharply. "What did you do?" Marcus didn't look up. "Nothing." The system recognized a pattern tone, language, escalation keywords. It flagged your conduct automatically. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "Is it?" He raised an eyebrow. "This company writes software that measures employee tone in customer service calls. Surely it can recognize disrespect in its own walls." Murmurs spread down the table. Someone whispered, "He's right." Another, "That's the same AI we use in training." Marcus leaned back slightly, voice still low. "You built tools to monitor humanity, then forgot to use them on yourselves." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was judgment, thick and shared. Victoria tried one last push, her tone brittle. "You're twisting this into some morality play." Marcus closed his notebook slowly. "No, I'm restoring context." He stood, buttoning his jacket. The air around him felt heavier, as if the room had learned who it was dealing with. "Every institution fails the same test," he said. "The silence test. What do you do when prejudice walks into the room and looks like policy?" He looked around at the faces, some ashamed, some alert, a few still in denial. "You all passed it today by staying silent." Jenna, the analyst, whispered softly. "Not all of us." Marcus met her eyes, a flicker of respect. "Then you'll like what happens next." Somewhere in the corner, her tablet chimed. The board's reply had arrived. "Bạn đã nói, tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho part 5. GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói." Part 5. The board speaks. The tablet's chime cut through the tension like a metronome announcing judgment. Jenna glanced at Marcus, then at Victoria, unsure whose permission she needed to breathe. "It's from the board," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They're watching this feed in real time." Victoria forced a brittle laugh. "Then they'll see how you ambushed me in my own department." Marcus didn't move. "You mean our department?" he said, his tone level but final. "Keep reading, Jenna." The young analyst swallowed. Message reads, "Effective immediately. Mr. Marcus Ellison assumes interim oversight of Horizon Holdings operations pending review. Compliance protocol active. All department heads to remain present." The words dropped like stones into still water. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful, it was the sound of people realizing the room had just changed owners. Victoria's face drained of color. "Interim oversight?" she repeated, voice cracking. "You can't be serious. You don't even work here." Marcus turned toward her slowly, not with anger, but with that unnerving calm that makes the truth sound louder. "That's the thing about ownership," he said. "It doesn't need your permission to exist." Richard Lang cleared his throat, cautious. "Mr. Ellison, if this is truly board-sanctioned, then perhaps we should—" Marcus cut in gently. "Richard, you're fine. You've raised no objections yet." The small mercy hit like thunder anyway. Richard exhaled. Victoria, though, was unraveling. "This is manipulation," she hissed. "You've hacked into our system. Forged messages." Jenna's tablet chimed again. "Another message," she said quietly. "From Legal Affairs. It says, 'Verification complete. Mr. Ellison's credentials confirmed. Proceed with full cooperation.'" A faint gasp rolled around the table. The guards at the door stepped back, hands dropping from their radios. The hierarchy had inverted in seconds. Marcus placed both palms on the table, leaning forward slightly. "You built a company around transparency," he said. "Yet every layer of it hides behind ego. So today, we peel one back." Victoria tried to hold her ground. "You had no right." He interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper but sharper than anything that had come before. "I had every right, 27% to be exact. Bought quietly, over 6 months, while you were too busy building reports that made you look indispensable. The words hit her like impact. Her lips parted, soundless. You own this? Marcus nodded once. Enough to remove you, but I'd rather educate you first. And, he turned toward the projection wall, tapping the console again. A new screen appeared. Internal ethics report. Pending review. The footage rewound to the moment she'd said, "You people think you can just walk in here like you belong." Gasps, again. Some from shock, some from guilt. Marcus said quietly, "There's your leadership legacy. The clip will be shown at tomorrow's board review." Victoria gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "You can't do this." He met her eyes. "Victoria, I already did." The light from the projector washed over them, both one face frozen in disbelief, the other calm as marble. And from somewhere in the back, Jenna whispered what everyone else was thinking. "He wasn't testing us for approval," she said softly. "He was testing us for truth." Bạn đã nói, "Tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho part 6. GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói." Part 6. The room reacts. For a moment, no one moved. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Victoria stood rigid, staring at the projection as if sheer will could erase her words from the screen. Her reflection trembled there, a woman undone by her own certainty. Marcus didn't look at her. He looked at everyone else. "You've all seen it," he said calmly. "Now ask yourselves, if the board hadn't intervened, would anyone here have spoken up?" A man near the end of the table shifted in his seat. "We didn't know who you were," he muttered, defensive, eyes on the table. Marcus nodded once. "Exactly. You didn't know, and that's the problem." Victoria tried to regain footing, her voice rising. "This is theater. He's twisting reality to make us look corrupt." Marcus glanced at her. "I didn't twist anything. I pressed play." Richard Lang folded his hands. "Victoria," he said gently, "it's on camera." Her breath caught. She turned to him, incredulous. "You're taking his side?" "I'm taking the side of facts," Richard replied. For once. The words seemed to land harder than any accusation. Across the table, a young financial analyst murmured to her neighbor, "I've seen her talk to interns like that before." "Same," someone whispered back. Marcus heard it all, the small confessions surfacing like cracks in the ice. "Honesty's contagious," he said quietly. "It just needed permission to speak." Ugh. Victoria slammed a palm against the glass table. "Enough!" The sound ricocheted through the room. "I've given my career to this company. You think one video will erase that?" Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Not erase. Reveal." He let the words sit. Heavy. Immovable. From the corner, Jenna's tablet chimed again. "Sir," she said softly, "the boardroom next door just joined the feed. They're watching from New York." Victoria's face blanched. "New York?" Marcus nodded. "Live." Suddenly, the large screen split into multiple boxes, faces of board members appearing one by one. Gray hair, tailored suits, serious eyes. The voice of Chairwoman Rivera filled the speakers. "Mr. Ellison," she said, measured and cool, "we've reviewed the incident. You're authorized to proceed." Marcus inclined his head. "Understood." Victoria started to speak, but Rivera's voice cut through. "Miss Ames, your conduct violates 3 clauses in Horizon's ethics charter. Effective immediately, you're placed on administrative leave pending termination review." Victoria froze, the kind of stillness that comes when the ground vanishes beneath your feet. "This is humiliating," she whispered. Marcus replied softly. "It's accountability. They sound similar when you're not used to either." She turned to him, eyes glassy. "You think this makes you righteous?" "No," he said. "It makes the room honest." The screen dimmed. The board's feed ended. The silence that followed wasn't tense anymore. It was relief disguised as quiet. Someone clapped once, awkward, small. Then another joined. Within seconds, it became a ripple of applause, hesitant, grateful, almost reverent. Marcus didn't smile. He simply looked at the faces in front of him, the same people who had watched injustice unfold 30 minutes earlier, and said, "Applause doesn't fix culture. Action does. Let's begin there." Victoria lowered her eyes. The sound of clapping faded, replaced by the low hum of consequence. "Bạn đã nói, tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho part 7. GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói." Part 7. The Weight of Truth. The applause died as quickly as it began. What lingered wasn't celebration, but consequence heavy and echoing. the kind that doesn't leave a room even after the people do. Victoria remained standing, her hands still flat on the glass table, shoulders rigid as marble. Her reflection in the polished surface looked older, smaller, defeated. The light from the projector trembled across her face, catching the glint of tears she refused to let fall. Marcus finally sat back, folding his hands with the calm of someone who'd already moved on to the next step while everyone else was still processing the last. "We're not done," he said. Richard looked up, cautious. "Sir, what happens now?" Marcus's gaze swept the room. "Now we talk about systems. Because discrimination isn't a person, it's a process." He tapped the table once. The screen behind him changed again from the frozen footage of Victoria shouting to a spreadsheet filled with data points, color-coded in red and green. "These are performance review trends from the past 3 years," he continued. "Every promotion, every disciplinary action." The columns told their own story. The red cells overwhelmingly associated with black and brown employees stretched like a wound across the digital canvas. Marcus stood, voice still steady. "It's not about one outburst. It's about what your data already knew but you chose to ignore." No one spoke. The numbers were louder than words. Jenna whispered, "Those are HR metrics." "Correct," Marcus said, "and they paint a clearer picture than any apology could." Victoria tried to push back, voice brittle. "Correlation doesn't mean bias." Marcus looked at her, almost gently. "It does when the correlation has a face, and that face keeps getting escorted out of the room." He turned back to the screen. "The algorithm you use to evaluate employee culture fit, it flags assertiveness as negative feedback 20% more often for people of color. You coded prejudice into software, then called it professionalism." A murmur rolled through the room. Even Richard's composure cracked. "My God," he muttered. Marcus's tone softened. "Good people can still build broken systems, but pretending not to see the cracks, that's a choice." Jenna, still by the corner, raised her voice a little. "So what do we do?" Marcus glanced at her. "You help me rewrite it. All of it." Victoria's composure snapped. "You're turning this company into a social experiment." Marcus faced her fully. "No, I'm turning it into what it pretends to be." Her voice broke. "You can't erase me." He shook his head slowly. "No one's erasing you, Victoria. You did that yourself the moment you mistook volume for value." The lights dimmed slightly as if the building itself understood the shift. The reflection of Marcus's face on the glass table overlapped hers, calm over chaos. He took a breath. "Every company claims to care about equity. Today, Horizon proves it or proves it never did." Outside the boardroom glass, employees were gathering, drawn by whispers and rumors. Phones pointed discreetly toward the door, capturing the moment history cracked open just enough to let the truth in. "Bạn đã nói, tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho part-time. GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói." Part 8. The rumble outside. Through the frosted glass walls, faint silhouettes had begun to multiply. Employees, assistants, accountants, interns stood clustered in the hallway, eyes fixed on the boardroom like spectators at a slow-motion revolution. Word had spread faster than policy ever could. The secret owner was inside, and the old order was breaking apart. Inside, the temperature had changed. The air conditioning hummed the same, but the atmosphere carried weight now, dense with awareness. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet was doing the work. "Open the blinds," he said calmly. No one moved at first. Then Jenna, steadying her trembling hands, crossed to the wall and pressed the button. The blinds drew up in one smooth motion, flooding the boardroom with light and faces, dozens of them, watching, recording. Victoria's jaw tightened. "This isn't protocol," she hissed. Marcus turned slightly. "Neither was what you did. But sunlight, Victoria, is protocol for the truth." The guards at the doorway stepped aside as the light poured in. You could see everything now, the cracks in the marble table, the stiffness in posture, the shame that no data report could quantify. Marcus glanced at the crowd beyond the glass. "You've all seen what happens when arrogance meets evidence," he said, voice level but carrying. "Now you'll see what accountability looks like when it wears a suit." He turned back to the executives. "We're going to hold an open review, right here. No edits, no PR filters. Every employee can watch." A collective intake of breath followed. Richard murmured, "That's unprecedented." "Exactly," Marcus replied. That's why it's necessary. Ugly. Victoria's voice cracked. You'll destroy morale. Marcus's gaze didn't waver. Morale built on silence is rot. Let it collapse. Jenna's tablet pinged again. Sir, it's connected the internal stream to the entire company network. Everyone's tuned in. Marcus nodded once. Then let's begin. He walked toward the center of the room, the very spot where Victoria had stood minutes earlier when she'd shouted him out. He rested one hand on the glass table. This isn't a takedown, he said. It's a lesson, the kind of lesson every future leader at Horizon will study. Victoria laughed bitterly. You're humiliating me in front of my staff. No, Marcus said softly. I'm reminding them who they never have to become. For a second, she seemed ready to strike back, to reclaim even a shred of control, but she couldn't. The truth had stripped her of language. Marcus turned to the audience beyond the glass. To everyone watching, he said, voice firm but almost intimate. This is what accountability looks like when it stops hiding behind HR emails. No shouting, no chaos, just transparency. He paused. You've been told that silence keeps you safe. It doesn't. It only keeps things the same. The hallway fell completely silent. The hum of fluorescent lights seemed to fade. Change, Marcus said, starts with who speaks first. Today, it starts here. Jenna lowered her eyes, realizing the camera lights on every phone were reflecting off Marcus like halos of quiet rebellion. Bạn đã nói, tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho Parchin, GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói. Part 9. The Reveal of Power. No one in the hallway moved. Even through the glass, the quiet had gravity. Inside, the only sound was the soft buzz of electronics, the hum of systems catching up to a truth that had just rewritten itself. Marcus straightened, the light from the window catching the faint gold pattern on his tie. You've all been told I'm here as a consultant, he said. That was convenient fiction. The truth is simpler. He reached into his jacket and drew out a sleek black folder. On its cover shimmered the embossed crest of Ellison Equity Partners. He opened it slowly, letting the silence build. 6 months ago, he continued, Ellison Partners finalized an acquisition of 27% of Horizon Holdings, effective last quarter. That stake increased to 41. Gasps rippled through the room, small at first, then widening like shockwaves. That's impossible, Richard murmured, though his voice lacked conviction. Marcus's tone stayed level. Possible, and complete, which means I don't just sit at this table now, I own it. He placed the folder on the glass, and the logo reflected upward black, sharp, undeniable. Victoria's composure shattered entirely. You orchestrated this? You tricked us? Marcus met her eyes, calm and unflinching. No, I tested you. There's a difference. A trick hides the truth. A test exposes it. Behind the glass, a wave of whispers spread through the employees. Someone lifted a phone higher. Someone else whispered, he owns the company. Marcus turned toward the watching crowd. Many of you didn't know my name this morning, he said. That's by design. I wanted to see if Horizon's values lived in its people or only in its slogans. He faced the table again. Now I know. Richard leaned forward, hands clasped tight. So what happens to us? Marcus paused. That depends on what you do next. I'm not here to burn the company down. I'm here to rebuild it on truth. But if you can't operate with integrity, you won't operate under my leadership. The glass wall caught his reflection, a man standing in the same spot he'd been humiliated minutes ago, now the axis around which the entire organization turned. He looked at Victoria one last time. You said people like me walk into rooms we don't belong in. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so it carried through every speaker, every device tuned into the feed. The irony, he said, is that this room was mine before you ever walked into it. Her face crumpled not from anger but recognition, the realization that she had shouted a man out of his own house. Marcus turned back toward the watching employees. If you've ever been told you don't belong, he said quietly, remember this moment. Belonging isn't granted. It's claimed by presence, by excellence, by proof. He closed the folder, the sound sharp and final. And proof, he added, is exactly what built this company. From now on, it will also run it. Outside, the crowd began to applaud, not loud, but steady, a slow rhythm of release. It wasn't for spectacle, it was for truth finally standing in the open. Bạn đã nói, Tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho part 10. GPT Black CEO mới. 35 phút đã nói. Part 10. The Shift. The applause outside grew into a low, resonant rhythm, not celebration, not chaos, but something deeper. A collective exhale after years of holding breath. Cameras stayed raised, but hands stopped shaking. Inside, Marcus didn't move. He let the sound roll through the glass like waves cleansing the air. When the last echoes faded, he spoke quietly. The truth changes things, but change doesn't happen because of a headline. It happens because people decide to be different after they know better. He looked around the room, every executive, every analyst, every guard still frozen in the gravity of what they'd witnessed. "So now that you know," he said, "what will you do?" No one answered. Richard Lang rubbed his temples. "Marcus, this company employs over 6,000 people. What you've done, it's going to ripple." "It's supposed to," Marcus replied. "That's how justice travels." He turned toward the screen again. With one tap, the projection shifted from data charts to the company's mission statement, a line that read, "Innovation with Integrity." He underlined the last word with his fingertip on the glass. "Integrity isn't a slogan," he said. "It's the price of admission." Jenna spoke softly from the corner. "Sir, everyone downstairs is watching. HR, legal, logistics, the feed's everywhere now." Marcus nodded. "Good. They deserve transparency." Victoria finally found her voice again, shaky but defiant. "You think this performance makes you some kind of hero? You've embarrassed the company, scared investors, turned employees into spectators." Marcus faced her. "Spectators? No. Witnesses. There's a difference." Her lips trembled. "You've made me a villain." "Ugh." "You made yourself one," he said gently. "All I did was show the film." She looked away, unable to meet the eyes of anyone around her. Marcus took a breath. Horizon's not the villain either. It's just been running the wrong script. He walked toward the window. Beyond the glass, employees still filled the hallways. Some were crying, some were clapping. Some were simply staring like they'd just watched something they weren't sure they were allowed to hope for. He turned back to the executives. "Tomorrow morning, every department lead will receive a directive. Diversity review, equity audit, and training reform. Real accountability, not a slide deck." Richard hesitated. "You'll get pushback." "I expect it," Marcus said. "Growth always sounds like threat to the comfortable." He paused, letting that sink in. Then he looked at Jenna. "Save the feed. All of it. No edits." "Yes, sir." He adjusted his cufflinks, the gesture precise, deliberate. "When this footage reaches the public record," he said, "it won't be labeled scandal. It'll be called a case study in culture." Victoria scoffed weakly. "And what does that make you?" Marcus met her eyes one last time. "Accountability's architect." Outside, the blinds caught the light of sunset, scattering it into gold fragments across the boardroom. In their reflection, he looked less like a man who'd won, and more like one who'd carried a truth heavy enough to bend an entire building toward honesty. "Bạn đã nói, tốt, viết tiếp với 500 token cho part 11. GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói." Part 11. The Consequence. By the time the sun began to slide behind the skyline, the boardroom no longer looked like a battlefield. It looked like aftermath, the kind of stillness that follows a storm that has rearranged everything it touched. The screens dimmed, the blinds half drawn, the crowd beyond the glass dispersing in hushed, reverent clusters. Inside, Marcus stood alone at the end of the table. He didn't need to speak. The silence had already said enough. But silence without direction becomes fear, and he wasn't here to leave fear behind. He looked toward Jenna. "Prepare the official statement," he said. "Keep it simple. Horizon reaffirms its founding values. Today marks the first step toward living them. No spin, just truth." Jenna nodded, fingers trembling slightly over her screen. "Yes, sir." Richard lingered by the door. His usual confidence softened into something almost human. "Marcus," he said carefully, "you know this will be all over the news by morning. Stock, PR, everything." Marcus turned to him. "If a company's value drops because it told the truth," he said, "then it wasn't worth much to begin with." Richard exhaled, a small, almost grateful smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. "Maybe you're right." Victoria sat at the far end, silent, hollowed out. The woman who had once commanded the room now stared at her reflection in the black glass of the powered-down monitor. Marcus approached her, not unkindly. "Victoria," he said quietly, "what you built here isn't gone. It just needs to be honest about who it left out." Her voice was barely audible. "You're going to fire me. I'm going to free you from pretending," he said. "There's a difference." "How?" She looked up, eyes rimmed red. "You're enjoying this?" "No," Marcus replied. "Justice isn't joy. It's balance." He turned away before the words could become pity. Jenna's tablet chimed softly, an alert from internal security. "Sir," she said, "the board's already logged your executive access as permanent. You're listed as acting CEO until the new term." Marcus blinked once, almost weary. "Acting CEO," he repeated, like the title was heavier than it sounded. "I didn't plan on that." Richard gave a dry chuckle. "Neither did we." Marcus looked around the table, the same glass surface that had once been a mirror of arrogance, now reflecting exhaustion and clarity. "Then let's make the most of the surprise," he said. He picked up his phone and called someone. "Naya," he said into the receiver, "activate Phase 2, full review of leadership files, freeze executive bonuses until the audit clears." A pause, then a crisp reply. "Already done, Marcus." He hung up. The sound was final, not dramatic. Outside, the hallway lights dimmed to evening mode. The building seemed to exhale, systems powering down, chatter quieting, the hum of change settling in. Marcus stayed still, watching the city's reflection ripple across the glass. "Power isn't proof," he murmured, almost to himself. "Proof is what you do once you have it." Behind him, Victoria stood slowly, gathering what little dignity she had left. "You'll never understand what it costs to lose everything," she said. Marcus didn't turn. "You're wrong," he said softly. "That's exactly why I'm here." "Bạn đã nói, tốt, viết tiếp với, 500 token cho part 12. GPT Black CEO mới, 35 phút đã nói. Pardouz." The quiet after. Night swallowed the skyline. The boardroom, once blinding with fluorescent defiance, now glowed with the softer light of a city learning humility. Reflections of passing cars shimmered across the glass walls, red and gold streaks painting silent confessions onto marble. Marcus stood by the window, jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened. The building below pulsed with quiet movement, employees leaving in slow, thoughtful waves. Some looked up as they passed the glass facade, spotting his silhouette. None waved. They didn't need to. The acknowledgement lived in the silence between them. Jenna entered quietly, holding her tablet against her chest. "The statement's gone out," she said. "It's already trending." Marcus turned, his voice calm. "And?" "Mixed reactions," she admitted. "Some proud, some afraid, but everyone's talking." He nodded. "Good. Fear means they're awake." Richard appeared at the doorway, sleeves rolled up, his usual bravado tempered into respect. "You sure you don't want a press team before morning hits?" Marcus shook his head. Truth doesn't need choreography. For a moment, none of them spoke. The city outside hummed like a patient heartbeat. Then Jenna asked softly, "Sir, was this always your plan?" Marcus looked back at the skyline, the glowing arteries of a city that had once shut its doors on him. "No," he said. "The plan was survival. The purpose became justice." He turned toward them both. "Tomorrow, people will argue. Some will call this overreaction. Others will call it revolution. But the truth," he paused, choosing the word with surgical care, "the truth doesn't care what it's called. It just stays true." Jenna smiled faintly. "That'll be quoted." "Let them quote it," Marcus said. "Let them remember what happens when dignity walks in quietly and leaves loudly." Richard exhaled, glancing toward Victoria's empty chair. "You think she'll recover?" Marcus's eyes softened. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow, even the ones who taught us how not to lead." A long pause followed. Then Jenna said, "You're staying here tonight, aren't you?" He smiled, just barely. "Every building has ghosts. Someone has to make sure they learn new habits." The lights flickered once as the automatic system began its nightly shutdown. The screens went dark. The city's glow took over. Marcus walked toward the center of the table, the same spot where, hours ago, his humanity had been questioned and rested a hand on the cold glass. "This isn't about revenge," he said quietly. "It's about rewriting who gets to define professionalism, power, belonging." He straightened, eyes steady. We start again tomorrow. Same building, different foundation. Jenna lingered at the door. What should the headline say? Marcus smiled, tired but certain. It should say nothing. Let the footage speak. Justice doesn't need narration. As they left, the automatic locks clicked shut. The boardroom fell silent again, not the silence of fear, but of balance restored. And in that stillness, under the hum of the city he once fought to enter, Marcus Ellison stood alone, not to claim victory, but to remind the walls what truth sounded like when spoken without apology.